Okay. So, hello everyone. Good evening. I'm Pritima Kaushal, and on behalf of ISTD Delhi chapter, I extend a very warm welcome to all our guests. So, in continuation of our Golden Jubilee celebration series, it has been our endeavor to bring you the best speakers and topics which will be of interest and value to our esteemed members. So today we are here again with an interesting topic, customer versus client, the trainer's dilemma. And our distinguished speaker is Mr. Karthik Rena, founder director of Learning Facilitators. So now I request the chapter chairman, Mr. Mukesh Jain, to give his welcome address. Mr. Jain, over to you. Mr. Jain?
Start.
Yes.
A very good evening, friends. I, on behalf of Management Committee of ISTD Delhi chapter, welcome you all to this Golden Jubilee year evening talk on client versus customer, the trainer's dilemma by Shri Karthik Rana, founder director. Friends, Indian Society for Training and Development, popularly known as ISTD, established in 1970, is a premier national institute of training and development professionals. ISTD has celebrated its Golden Jubilee recently. ISTD maintains a large chapter network of 46 chapters with more than 8,000 institutional and individual members. IST, the society is affiliated to IFTDO, USA and RTDO, Manila. IFTDO is next IFTDO convention is going to happen in India between October and December 2021. ISTD conducts a PG diploma in training and development, a correspondence course through distance learning to superior post under the central government and PSUs. Friends, during this Golden Jubilee year, ISTD is giving 50% discount in the life membership. You can enroll yourself paying less than 5,000 rupees for life membership of ISTD. For more details, please log in to istd.co.in or istddelhi.in. I once again welcome Shri Karthik Rana sir, all the past national president, chapter chairpersons, NC members, senior members, and friends from ISTD, NIPM, HRD, DMA, FMA, ISTD diploma students, faculty members, and students from various institutes. I wish you all a wonderful evening and joyful weekend. Namaskar. Over to Prathama ji.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jain. Thank you very much. So I now request the chapter general secretary, Mr. Ajay Sahu, to introduce the speaker. Mr. Sahu?
I think Sahuji will have to unmute himself.
All right. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm reminded of a very old saying which goes like this: one who pays the piper calls the tune. Fair enough, because there are only two people involved, one who pays the piper and the piper proper, who naturally, since he gets paid, he calls the tune. But when, just imagine if there are three people, there's a payer, there's a piper, and there is another person whom the piper would want to play the tune, then it becomes difficult. Similar situation arises when there is a coach, there is a coachee, and there is a client who pays the coach to coach the coachee. And something happens when the trainers is paid by an organization, and there are people who are to be trained. Now there are three people involved. Then it becomes very difficult for the trainer to basically the professional ethic suggests that the trainer should either be true to the pair or to the trainee. So I would not like to step into the shoe of Mr. Raina, because this is a very tough topic to handle. And I'm privileged to introduce Mr. Raina this evening. But when I saw his CV, I was dumbfounded, in the sense I would have taken a lot of time of his own talk time. So whatever I remember about Mr. Raina, I would like to introduce him. Mr. Raina, he's an MBA from Jamnalal Bajaj Institute of Management Studies, and he started his career with Procter & Gamble. After about 4 years stint in Procter & Gamble, he moved to GSK Consumer Healthcare. There he rose to the level of head India and Bangladesh. Then he moved to Dabur, and Dabur, he actually was responsible for moving Dabur out of the rural business to the urban business. At that time, the Dabur had almost 70% of their sales was in the rural area. He moved Dabur products from the rural to the urban areas, and he was responsible for introducing Real fruit juice as well as homemade products, the brands. And he rose to the level of CEO of the Dabur food business. And subsequently, he moved out of India, and he has worked in Nigeria, in Western Africa. And his last corporate assignment was as management director of Unilever Best Foods. And since 2005, he has started his own consulting and learning business, consulting and learning. His client list, it reads like the who's who of the corporate world. And he stays in Delhi, and he's a very, very accomplished keyboard player. And he adores his granddaughters. Over to Mr. Raina.
Okay, thank you, and good evening, everyone. The trouble about having introductions like this, Ajay, is that you've got to live up to them. And that's never very easy. But it's a pleasure seeing some faces, Dwarka in particular, after a long, long time. Doc Rao, I don't know how he tends to look as young as he does always. Somehow age doesn't seem to catch up with him. Even the mustache is jet black, but wonderful to see all of you. It's an absolute pleasure. I've heard a lot about ISTD. A long, long time ago, I think this was, there used to be a gentleman called Mr. Rajan Brijnath. I think Dwarka knows him well, who was quite involved with ISTD, and I had the pleasure of attending a few sessions in ISTD along with Rajan Brijnath, because I was associated with him for a while during my days as the training manager in GSK. So in a sense, it's a bit of a coming back, but great to be with all of you. Today, the topic that I've chosen actually is a very interesting topic. The reason I chose this particular topic, or rather, I requested Pritima to allow me to speak on this topic, is that this is an area which I have personally experienced quite intensively, both the dilemma as well as the resolution of it. And I believe very strongly that there are two ways we can look at this topic. One is to look at it as a semantic issue. And like everything else that we look at as semantics, that's a disastrous way of looking at it. There is a lot beyond just the semantics that we associated with these two words, client and customer. In my personal case, the company I run, Learning Facilitators, I've split myself across three basic disciplines. The first discipline is obviously training, that's close to my heart, but that keeps me busy for about 25 to 30% of my time. Almost 40-45% of my time goes in the biggest chunk, which is consulting, primarily in areas concerned with go-to-market modeling, sales, etc. And I consult both in India and abroad. And the rest of the time, I am a professor of management at the SP Jain Global School of Management. So I teach at their campuses in Dubai, in Singapore, Sydney, and more. Interesting and diversified portfolio, but by definition, I have different clients and I have different customers because each has to be tackled differently. First of all, each category has to be looked at differently, and within each category, they have to be tackled differently. How do you Yeah, sorry, I got muted, but back on. So I will go ahead and talk through a PPT that I have prepared on the occasion. We can have questions and answers, as Pritima suggested, after the talk is over. But if there is something that you really want to, kind of come in and either share your experience in the area, or there is something that you would like to make in terms of a point, I'd be quite happy to get interrupted. I don't see that as being a problem. All you need to do is show your hand and unmute yourself, and perfectly happy to get interrupted for that particular reason. Now, I just want to confirm one thing from you. Can you all see the slide?
Not yet, not now.
Okay. How is it now?
Yeah, now it's okay.
Okay. Now, if you notice, there is an interesting visual that I have shown. Two pieces of jigsaw, but if you look at them closely, whether one's horizontal or whether one's vertical, they're identical. Perhaps the only difference is in the shade, and that's really the symbolism between these two terms. There is a lot of commonality across these, and I'd like to share with you how I have looked at the entire exercise. So what are our objectives today? What do I intend to achieve through this talk? I think number one is try to define the concepts, the client and the customer beyond semantics, right? It's important because a lot of semantic definitions actually end up saying they are the same thing, but I beg to disagree. The second thing is I would like to relate the development of these concepts to the overall concept of relationship building. Now, as trainers, as consultants, that's very critical because our credibility as a person who is suggesting something for someone to try will directly depend on how much they believe what we are talking is reliable, how much they believe what we are talking is based either on our personal experience or our personal study. So it's very important that an element of trust, an equation of trust, a bond of trust is created between the trainer and the trainees, and therefore the concept of relationship building. And I'd like to relate these to that concept. And then I would like to suggest a set of strategies that can maximize a trainer's relevance to his or her, what I call service seekers. Service seekers are the people who are interested in getting some benefits out of what a trainer or a consultant has to offer. And I use the word seekers very consciously because good trainers know what the person is seeking. And if you can fashion your entire presentation in that direction and develop a strategy to do so, then automatically you will be recognized as a success and people will believe that they want to share with you. So these are the three key things that I hope to achieve. We'll look at the end of it to see if I actually did or not. Now, what is the definition of this term? Let me take the common definitions, what I call in practice definitions, right? Customer describes someone who makes purchases of a product or service, either once off, or on some kind of a regularity. That's the simple definition of the term customer. The client, on the other hand, tends to have a slightly more developed definition. It's usually reserved for someone who pays for highly specialized professional services. Now, this is how the dictionary calls it, or how the general definition, if you Google or go to any other source, these are the kind of basic definitions that you will see. For purposes of this talk, however, and on the basis of my own experience, I would like to define them slightly differently. First and foremost, I would like to think of a customer as a person who engages transactionally with a service provider. It means treated like a one-off or a series of one-off transactions, right? Now, it's important to understand what this means. The term transactional, by definition, has the boundary of a transaction. It starts with the definition of a transaction and ends with either the achievement or the non-achievement of that transaction. So there is a transactionality in the definition of a customer. So what does it mean? It means clearly that both sides define the boundaries of each transaction. Now, this could mean that when you transact with the same party 2-3 times, you could be defining different boundaries. And therefore, one doesn't necessarily flow into the other. So there is a one-offness about the customer in that sense. The other interesting thing in any transactional relationship is that both sides seek to maximize the returns that they get from the transaction. So in a very typical way, all of you have been trainers and I've been a trainer for so long. One of the most interesting things is when you find that the customer, so to speak, wants you to do it at the lowest cost, wants you, of course, to use the best possible material, wants you to use the best possible software to be able to achieve what you have to. And you are busy trying to figure out how you can manage and how you can maximize the best out of it. It does happen, happens for a lot of cases. I would be very happy to share with you, while I will not name people, name organizations, but this has been more often than not a very common thing. In fact, I would even say to the extent that I have had instances where certain customers have sat down with me, briefed me, got me to design a program for them. And that's the last I saw of them until I found one of my own designs on the internet. So it's nothing unusual. It is part of the game. But clearly there is a transactionality which says, let me maximize the returns from the transaction. And while references may be made to the previous transaction or discussions, each transaction is still a separate entity on its own. Now, this particularly begins to happen when you have got a change in guard. And I've experienced this with companies, certain organizations where I have been involved in both consulting and training assignments over the last 8 to 10 years. In the process, people have changed. And when people have changed, there is almost like a let's rediscover the whole thing all over again. A lot of the earlier priorities may have changed. That makes sense as far as content or design goes. But yet also people have their own colleagues, they have their own ex-colleagues, they have their own friends. And they would like to bring those into the system, etc., etc., etc. So frankly, the value of a previous transaction gets significantly diminished in the process. But you take it. I mean, as a trainer, that's not something that you have any right to complain about, because you could be that trainer who benefits from the change. So it kind of goes all the way. So clearly, that is one way I look in the context in which we define the term customer. On the other hand, to me, a client is somebody whose engagement is fiduciary. Fiduciary basically has to do with trust and relationships, which is very different from a transactional relationship. And To me, I use the word client specifically to define an organization, an individual, a set of individuals who have a greater interest in the relationship. And it's not by sacrificing any other interests related to the organization. In fact, if anything, it enhances it. So there's clearly a fiduciary element to it, because fiduciary involves building trust, especially with regard to a relationship. I began the evening by talking to you about the concept of trust, and I'm sure all of you who are in this business understand the extreme importance and value of trust as something that needs to be practiced. And a client is somebody who tends to work heavily in that direction. So what this actually means is you have both sides working on long-term goals for a long-term relationship. I mean, I take a lot of pride in the fact that almost 75% of my current clients are people who have engaged with me multiple areas, multiple programs, multiple counseling assignments. And what's even more fascinating is that they have referred me to other organizations. And in some cases, if some of them have left an organization and joined another, they've invited me to work in the new organization. So I've been very, very lucky that way. At the same time, I've also worked very closely with them lots and lots of times to develop things that are highly custom. By the way, I do only customized programs. I don't do generic programs. So a lot of customization that has been done involving a lot of my time, etc., has gone in, because the objective was not just to make a good consulting assignment or a good training program, but to cement a very, very handsome relationship. Plus, of course, creating the strong bond which makes that person want to come back to you. So a client is a person who is, in a sense, I would say, customer plus. Customer, but a lot more. Same time, relationships take time. And when relationships are built over a period of time, it is very, very difficult to expect you to evolve to the client level in a very short period of time. So in that particular context, I just want to compare the customer client and then move on to relationship building. To me, the fundamental difference is customers tend to be transactional, clients fiduciary. I've already covered that. Customers tend to look at things short term, clients long term. The goal of a customer tends to be to maximize return from a transaction, whereas the goal of the client is to build and strengthen bonds. Most customer discussions tend to be highly competitive, whereas client discussions tend to be collaborative. Customers, if people deal with customers, they are in the business of giving them satisfaction, i.e. meeting their expectations. And when you get into a good relationship with a client, then you always tend to exceed those expectations. And therefore, I use the word delight in that context. Now, the reason I mention this is because it is naive of us to expect that we will have our entire portfolio of people who work with us to be in the client level. Consciously, as part of your product portfolio, you have customers and you have clients. In other words, you deal with people on one-off basis. You deal with people frequently on one-off basis because that's how they are built. That's how the organizations are. At the same time, you identify those with whom you work as clients. So I know of people whom I have done 15 or 20 assignments for, but each one has been a transaction. At the same time, I know people have done 4 or 5 assignments, but they very much are a relationship building, bond building kind of an exercise. As trainers, I believe we need to have a blend of both. We need to have in our product portfolio people who will deal with us as clients, as transactional clients, who will deal with us in a way in which they will be competitive, they will want to get the most out of us, etc. At the same time, we will also need to have people who belong to the second category. Now, it's a debatable point as to how much should each be. I tried to make an assessment in my own case to see whether I could actually have a blend. And roughly, I noticed that about 60% of my business is today coming from the client side of the business, and 40% still comes. And I'm not keeping my teaching into the discussion. I'm primarily talking about commercial relationships. So I think we have to understand that both types exist. And we need to see how we can fit this in the context of the relationship curve. I will share with you how things evolve. A lot of you are familiar with this, but I thought I would just mention, and that provides a good context to what I'm about to say. If I see this graph that you see going from the left bottom to the right, that's really the evolution of the relationship. I believe it all starts at point zero, which is at the bottom, when you have identified or you have been contacted by a person who could be interested in knowing, or you feel that person may use your facilities, your capabilities, etc. However, you are an untrusted unknown at that point in time. They've heard about you. They perhaps have never met you. To that extent, there is an unknown element. Untrusted because as yet, there is no transaction. We should not confuse distrust with untrusting. Untrusted means don't know if I can trust this person or not. At the same time, you say, will I get this guy? Will I not get this guy? So there is a looseness, but that's where the whole thing starts. That's where the thing starts completely. Then as you deal with the person and you talk with the person once or twice, then the person begins to realize and must begin to realize that while I do not know how this person will deal with me in terms of actual delivery and performance on the objectives, but sure, the guy seems to know his stuff. So you have moved away from an unknown into the level of an expert. So the soft suspect is the client or the customer, and that particular person at this moment seems to be a little more amenable. Maybe he's called you for a meeting, you've sat together, you've had a chat, you do see some common grounds, you have more or less hopefully started to understand what the problems are. So from there you evolve to the third stage, which is where the customer surely is interested and calls you a possible expert. What is a possible expert means? I will be comfortable with this person. He definitely seems to, or she definitely seems to know their stuff. And hopefully it will all work out good for us. So there is, the possible bit is about the relationship. It is beginning to evolve. And that's when the customer takes his first transactional effort, and that is becomes a customer. And you are now a hired expert. In the first time around, it is purely a discussion about what you're paying the person, how much time you're investing in the person, and what he's likely to bring to the table. There has actually been no experience up to this stage. So at this stage, the person converts to the customer. So this left-hand side is where you see a lot of transactional thinking going on. The left-hand side is where people are getting into great details about what it costs, how much should it cost, what should be the time, what should be the roadmap, etc., etc. So a lot of that is happening at this stage. Now, hopefully, you have done decent work and the person begins to get good feedback from the people you're involved with, as well as his or her own personal dealing. For example, I do coaching for a couple of CEOs. And there is no third person. It's directly the CEO's personal experience that is involved in the process. So that's when you start moving to what I call the client side of this entire relationship value curve. So far, it has been transactional. Now, slowly, you become what I call a steady supplier, and that person becomes an advocate. Advocate in the sense that the person begins to appreciate what you're doing for him and is happy to talk to others, maybe even give you referrals so that you can go ahead and do the business. But that only happens when you have done a transaction, set of transactions initially, and hopefully now have bonded into a fairly decent relationship with the person, and you become his or her steady supplier. And then if you're lucky, you move on to the last stage, which is where you see each other as partners and you become a trusted advisor. I mean, I feel proud of the fact that there are at least 3 organizations now with whom I've been involved over the last 12 years. And I actually operate far beyond the space of what I'm supposed to. I was involved in counseling one of the children on their careers, which had nothing to do with the context at all. So it does evolve into that direction because the person feels that you can bring a lot more to the table than exactly what you were originally signed in for. And that is really where the whole thing evolves. When I had one of the most early experiences I had of this concept was in the year 1975. I had just joined as area sales manager for Bihar for a company called Richardson Hindustan, which you know as Procter & Gamble now. And I was headquartered in Patna looking after old undivided Bihar. Used to have a salesman called Kuldeep Singh Arora, who was headquartered in a city called Muzaffarpur. I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar with that city. One day I get a call from the distributor of Muzaffarpur. And he says, would you like to give a holiday next week for 2 days to Mr. Kuldeep Singh Arora? So I said, look, I don't understand why you should be asking on his behalf. I mean, if Mr. Arora wants to take leave, he will call me and ask me. So the distributor says, but he doesn't know that he's supposed to take leave next week. Now that was like, I was totally floored. I said, what the hell? I mean, if he wants to take leave, he doesn't know he wants to take leave. You're taking leave on his behalf. What's happening? So he said, no, sir, actually, let me tell you what is the truth. The truth is this, sir, that on next Wednesday, our entire family is traveling from Muzaffarpur to a place called Sitamarhi, which is not very far away in Bihar. And the reason we are going there is we are going to see a girl for our son, for the proposal of marriage. We would like to take Mr. Kuldeep Singh Arora with us because over the years that he has worked with us here as your company salesman and we are the distributor, we find that he's an excellent judge of people. He's very honest and he will be very forthright in his views. We value his views and we would like to take him along with us, and it will be 1 or 2 days, and that's the reason I asked you this question. Now, that comes as a surprise. When this guy is supposed to book orders, this guy is supposed to make sales. These are all transactional things. But look at his value. His value, and this is 1975, and look at Bihar. You know what the concept of bringing a girl into your family, the kind of strength and value that has. And here is this person asking a salesman for his advice. I mean, I just shared that as somebody else's experience, but in my own last 15 years that I've spent, I have found that the real relationships that have worked out are those where people go actually beyond the immediate transactional brief. And that's where I believe the concept of the client becomes very important. Now, this is a very interesting financial issue here. Let me draw this little curve which says what is the concern for the money or the rupee. If you notice the curve very carefully, it keeps rising till we reach the level of customer. That's true. As long as your transactional money will always be the main thing, people will find ways and means of reducing your design cost, your delivery cost, your travel cost, whatever, etc. But once you have moved on and the person begins to see you from the eyes of a client, you will find that the actual cost becomes secondary. It's not that the cost won't be there. It's that decline doesn't show the cost will reduce. The decline shows the concern for the cost and its relative value in the overall decision to work along with you becomes lesser and lesser. And that's really how this entire thing pans out. So this relationship value curve is something I always keep in front of me. I try every year to ask myself with each of my clients, where am I? I mean, there are moments I've even slipped back because of pressures of work, etc. But it's a great way to strategize my thinking. If I can plot where I am with which client or with which customer, then I am able to say what I should do next. And more importantly, I can identify those customers who I believe now I need to move into a client line immediately. So this is something that I found very, very useful, which I thought I'd share with you. How do you then therefore transition? And I just take you through these various steps. And a very, very useful model comes to me from this company called Rain. I've quoted them below. It's called Rain Consulting. They have done some fantastic work, especially related to selling, advertising, and things like that. So what are the levels at which we start building this transition to make more and more of the people who are our customers into clients? The level one is what I call the connect level, which is purely transactional, which is heavily at the customer end of the thing. There are two types of connects that you do. You first connect the dots. Curiosity is one of your biggest skills here, where you try to understand their needs. You learn to craft compelling solutions for their needs. A lot of customization comes in here. But at the same time, you also, there is a saying we have, ki hamari wavelength pe aa gaya hai banda. That means really the person begins to connect with you personally. So we make an effort to connect both with the dots and the people, but as yet, like I said, it's still transactional in nature. So we move to the second level where a bit of the client bit will come into play. You need to convince about how you are the best choice, which means how do you go about proving your overall value superior? How are you different? I think this becomes a very important factor. I have often been told that, look, you are quoting so much, but so-and-so has come and given us a quotation which is lower. A very common thing that is there. And my only point of view always has been is that before we talk about the quotations, can we talk about value? Can you talk about what differentiation I am offering to you? Because you all have been trainers and you know that a lot of cut and paste guys are in this market who completely mess up things. But we need to make our customers and clients conscious about differentiation. Then comes the bit about maximum return. There are many formula of ROIs and all that. I'm not getting into that. But to me, there is a certain expectation that an individual or a group of people or an organization, when they take you on, they have from you. The achievement or exceeding of those expectations are the results that they are looking for. Obviously, if you've not understood what those are, you could be doing what you think is the best program possible, but it's a disaster because that's not the way they are looking at it. So persuaded that you could be able to deliver them the results. And then of course, the minimum risk, first and foremost, how professional are you? How trustworthy are you? And how experienced and confidence inspiring are you? This is where in our kind of business, unfortunately, you are aware of the fact that a lot of the times in the training business, copyrights are just ignored and thrown out of the window. Original work done by somebody is plagiarized without even acknowledgement about it. And it happens. I gave you an example. I've had instances where I have been told that, look, we'd like you to come and deliver a program. We've already designed the program. And what I've been shown is a program I had done on the same subject for somebody else who has now left that old organization and joined the new organization. It's not unusual. I'm sure a lot of you would have experienced that. So the person must get the feeling that what you are going to deliver would be professional, trustworthy, and must inspire confidence. Because if you are seen as a cut and paste person, then it's extremely unlikely that you would go beyond that transaction. So this stage, the convince stage, I think is the stage where you're beginning to clientize your customer. Until, of course, you move to the third level, which I call the collaborate level, which is about you collaborate on what? You do joint discussions, you do joint actions. I have 4 of my clients who actually I have the luck of sitting down with their sales teams when they do their sales planning. And it is from there that we begin the recognition of what needs to be identified in terms of new skill sets that are required. This became particularly evident during this COVID crisis, when you appreciate that a whole lot of new skills became critical. And these clients of mine, the level at which they involved me in discussions with them was phenomenal. And I feel very proud of the fact that I could give them back a lot, primarily because there is a lot of joint discussions, a lot of joint actions that take place. Because particularly when you're talking of trying to train a lot of people who've never led virtually, they're in sales in particular, which is the bulk of my training, people are used to face-to-face training. The concept of online doesn't exist. In fact, even today, a lot of sales people are extremely uncomfortable with technology, even today. So how do you get people to lead virtually when the control is not in the hand of the leader? The control is in the hand of the guy. He can mute himself off, he can shut himself off, he can choose to say that, sir, can't hear you, sir, and technology is an issue, sir, I'm not getting good connectivity. So how do you end up connecting and going virtual? So we spent hours and hours on this. And I would request all of you, if you have the time and if you've not done so already, then McKinsey has done some amazing work. They are publishing these experiences and articles every single day. In my email, I get about 4 to 5 such every day about how people have worked along with their customers, their clients, whatever you choose to call them, and evolved newer strategies during the COVID experience. And then finally, of course, how are you doing this collaboration? How easy is it? How customer friendly is it? How proactive is it? How responsive are you? So this is the way in which I believe if you can transition to making more and more of clients, as I define them, in your portfolio than just plain customers. Okay, few things here. I mean, the connect bit is the cost of entry. It's a necessary thing, not sufficient. If you do your convincing well, you have no loss to business, becomes important for you. You get more and more of the business that you aim for. And finally, of course, you grow your demand, right? But most importantly is the last one, where the buyer of your services actually begins to own them. And that is absolutely fascinating. So that's how I believe we can do this movement. I want to play you this, and then I'll really talk about why I want to talk about this. This is something very interesting, and I hope Alok is there in case I go wrong somewhere. Let me see. Oops, sorry. Just give me a minute, guys. I hope you can see the screen now.
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Yeah. I'm stopping it just to know if everybody heard the sound.
No, we didn't.
Okay.
Sound is not there, sir.
Just see if it's coming now.
Yeah, now it's there, sir.
Is it on now?
Yeah.
Okay, just listen to the words. I've just taken a small snippet from a ghazal of his. Just listen to the words of what he says, and then I'll just expand on them.
गिरे जो चंद समझ सको तो आंसू, जो समझ सको तो आंसू, ना समझ सको तो पानी, जो समझ सको तो आंसू, ना समझ सको तो पानी.
Now, what he says is very interesting. He says, "मेरी बेजुबान आंखों से गिरे जो खतरे." Now, imagine it's your customer talking or your client talking, and his eyes are saying something. He is saying, trying to say something. Not everybody is very clear in what they say, but have you understood it? And he says, "मेरी बेजुबान आंखों से गिरे चंद खतरे, जो समझ सको तो आंसू." If you've understood it well, if you have that right quality of empathy, if you vibed well, then you know it's a tear and it needs to be addressed. Or not samajh sako to pani. If not, it's a droplet of water. It has no value. I think this summarizes basically what the transitioning from a customer to client does. It ends up telling us that, look, here is a person who has a lot of things that he wants. He may be clear, he may be unclear. You may be clear, you may be unclear, but you need to work along with him so you can work to a situation where he begins to feel that, yes, I seem to be dealing with someone who understands me, जो मेरे आंसू पहचानता है और पानी नहीं समझता हूँ, and somebody who can share this not for today alone, but for the future. And I feel very strongly that this is the way forward. I mean, I've gained immensely in all my transactions over the last 15 years since when I've started. So all I want to say is thank you. I want to wish you all good luck on this. Just want to close up by telling you that if any of you are interested, then I have a very interesting client-centeredness questionnaire. It's about how do you work along with your clients to become more and more centered around them. It's not about making them depend on you to solve their problems, but it's about making them trust you because you don't make them lose their self-respect. You know, it's a lot like a doctor. Suppose you have a stomach problem and you go to a doctor. Just imagine a scenario that you've entered the doctor's chamber. He says, "Doc, I've got this terrible stomach ache and a stomach problem." And the doctor doesn't say anything. He just writes a prescription and gives it to you. The chances are you'll feel quite cheated. He hasn't even asked for anything. But the doctor's clever. He is totally client-centered. He knows exactly what it is. So he'll say, "I see, when did this start? Okay, I see. Did you eat anything yesterday?" And so on and so forth. And then he sits down and he says, "Okay, lie down. Is it in the upper abdomen, middle abdomen, lower abdomen, whatever?" And he finally perhaps just recommends the same product that he would have in the first instance. But how do you feel? And I think that's what client-centeredness. It is not just about doing right, but about making that people feel that it is right. So I'm going to base it on this little model, which says that this is incidentally the Oxford Management Consultant model, which says that client-centeredness is based on 3 elements. What kind of an expert advice giver are you? Do you overdo it? Do you underdo it? What is your attitude to clients? When somebody raises an issue, do you base it on the issue or do you base it on what you think of that individual as a person? Are you influenced by that individual and your attitude to him or her rather than to the issue? And finally, how much is your self-image and personal power interfering? This is where a lot of politics comes into the picture. Is your ego larger than the entire issue? So if any of you is interested, feel free. There is a particular questionnaire that I've got which says, "How client-centered are you?" And I will be very happy to send that to Pritima. She can share it with the people if anybody is interested. And I'll be more than happy to actually do a full analysis and indicate ways in which I believe on the basis of an honest answer that you'll be giving to this questionnaire, you can improve your transitioning from customer to client. So that's all I wanted to share with you on the basis of my experiences. And thank you very much for your time. And that's it. I've taken my 45 minutes. So that's
Right.
it.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Mr. Rana, for a wonderful and very engaging presentation. So we have very interesting questions. In fact, somebody wants to know, first of all, that what is the name of this ghazal?
Yeah, this is actually a gentleman called Ustad Shujat Hussain Khan. He's one of my favorites. And this ghazal is called Ye Inayatein Ghazab Ki. Ye Inayatein Ghazab Ki. If you
Okay.
just type that out on YouTube, he's very much there.
Okay.
And I'm just fascinated by ghazals because I think ghazals, I use a lot of them in my training because I think they capture not just ghazals. I mean, like for example, I was doing a program for Coromandel Fertilizers in Vijayawada. And I think Dwarka will tell you this. I have a very, very, very perfunctory understanding of Telugu. I know those kind of words that are normally not used in public. But I did use a fair bit of Telugu poetry. So yeah, I'm very fond of it. I've got this huge bank with me. So anybody interested, feel free. I'd be very happy to share them. I know Vijay Kaul is interested.
Yeah.
He was.
Okay. So Mr. Gurmukh Singh Baba is also saying that you really understood Ustad Sujat Hussain very well. You know, this is a comment of his. And he
Yeah.
also has a question. And
Yeah.
his question is, how old is virtual training environment?
Well, actually, the virtual training environment by itself is almost about 15 years old. But the extent of it has been very little. The reason being that you're aware that 94 is when the internet came in. So anything that will happen will only happen after 1994. E-commerce on its own started fairly early because it was not the selling side. Interestingly, it was the purchasing side which initiated e-commerce. However, online training started very early on with the evolution of e-commerce. My first experience with online training as such was in the year 1996. It happened when I was launching Real Fruit Juice. And there was no technology available in India at that particular point in time. And we needed to know a little more. And the particular type of packaging, it's called an yellow pack that we use for Real Juice, was made in Norway. So when we decided that we will get into this business and we purchased a plant, a ready-made plant in Kathmandu in Nepal actually. Then our entire team needed to be made aware of how this packaging has to be managed, etc. So that's when we had our first online training from Norway. So the person got in from Norway, and it was very new because, like I said, internet was 2 years old. Dabur had got its first internet connection only somewhere towards the end of 1995, and this was happening in the summer of 96. So yeah, I mean, so in that sense, virtual training though. But if you ask me, as a very active medium, about 3-4 years ago, it actually started being active for strange reasons. I think one of the main reasons it started becoming active was cost saving. Because in a face-to-face training, you move people from all over the place. And when you move people, there is a two types of costs. One is the opportunity loss, which is they're not in the field doing the work they're supposed to be doing. And the second is the actual physical cost of their travel and stay and stuff like that. So a lot of companies for certain types of training, particularly product knowledge training, or things in which it was more of a one-way training where things were being communicated one way, less of interaction, etc. That's when online went in. With COVID, it has gone through the roof. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think it's my personal view. I think it's heavily overdone in today's times. And I have good reason to believe that basic training will come back into its own sometime after the COVID is over. I mean, it's not one extreme from one to the other, but yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
You're
So
welcome.
next question is from Mr. Ajay Sahu. And
Yeah.
in a coaching relationship where a coach is engaged by an organization to coach a senior executive,
Right.
who is the customer and who is the client? Especially the coaching goal of
Okay.
the organization
Right.
and the
Yeah.
coaching,
Yeah.
the
See, there is, I would,
expectation of the coaching.
see, I would put it very simply. The
Yeah.
people who retain you will always be your customers/clients. That's very clear in my mind. Now, the person who becomes your coachee, right? You have to decide how the person has come on to you. For instance, I gave you an example. There are a couple of company CEOs who have themselves called me up to be a coach for them. So that is where the two roles from their side have merged. But there are instances when I am brought on to coach another group of people who are within the company. So my prime contract is always with the person who invited me to coach the other group. That's very clear. However, there is another contract that I sign with people who would be my coaches. That contract would very, very clearly involve all the elements of client and customer, because you can't coach without a trusted relationship or a good bond. You can't coach without having understood what the hell he needs coaching for. So I see both transactional as well as client things happening at that end. But that is a separate contract between me and them. There is therefore a dual contract that I do. Sometimes before I sign the contract with the coachee, I have it cleared by the person who brought me into the system. Right. So clearly, yeah. So both would be, to answer your question simply, both would be coaches or clients as the way you would define them. But clearly my deliverable is first to the person who brought me into the system. Sorry.
Thank you very much.
No, Rajkumar Nandi
are you able to hear me?
I can hear you, yes, Pratima. I said Rajkumar Nandi asked a question. Yeah, go ahead.
So I'll just take this question and then we can go to Mr. Nandi's question. Mr. GP Rao is asking, in converting a customer into a client, besides competence and relationship, is there any other factor that is important?
Yeah, I think credibility is the most important, frankly, because the relationship can't involve if it is based on some kind of a doubt of your statements, of the truth of what you say. Along with that, also, I think the next part is vulnerability. You can't be projecting yourself as a Mr. Know-it-all. You have to accept there are certain things. So I think one of the biggest challenges in that relationship is the ability to say no. I don't know. And I think these two would be, to me, in addition to the points that I mentioned, very important.
Okay.
Vijay has asked an interesting question.
Right.
Can we use Indian American CEOs to become virtual trainers? I mean, to me, I don't think I would really worry about what the background of the person is. I would first make sure that the Indian American CEO is not caught in the time warp of India when he left it. That's one of the biggest issues I've had with a lot of Indian American CEOs who still see India as the way it was when they left to study or something like that.
Yeah.
But having said that, it's not a common thing for all, but I will make sure that if I'm bringing somebody as a virtual trainer, then I will not bring somebody who is still thinking of India as cows sitting on the road and nothing of the sort. So, and I believe you, there are a hell of a lot there. There are a hell of a lot. I mean, I don't want to make names, but we all read about them nowadays. Vijay, to answer your question, per se, I have nothing against Indian Americans, but I would do my screening if I'm bringing them in, that they would be relevant and they would add value. Particularly if they can add value. Say, for example, I have used a lot of my foreign contacts when I train companies on virtual leadership in this context. You know, like an area sales manager for one of the very large confectionery companies that I handle. I ran a program on virtual leadership. So we have two concepts in virtual leadership called the virtual water cooler and the virtual coffee machine. Because a lot of discussions happen there, as you know, in the real world. So now people in India have very little experience of virtual coffee machines, whereas there is a software called the Huddle, which exists internationally, which is used to actually, in a sense, formalize the concept of the virtual water cooler and the virtual coffee machine. So yes, I'll use them definitely.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So,
Yashwant has got a
Mr. Nandi, Mr.
Yeah,
Nandi's question was,
Yeah.
it was a comment actually, observation. So he's
Right.
saying my takeaway is the difference between customer and client and its transition from customer to client. So this is what he wanted to say. And he's interested in the questionnaire. So Mr. Rena, I would request you to, if you could share the questionnaire on the chat box, you know, they can just copy paste. If you have
What
the
I'll
questionnaire
do,
with you.
Pritima,
readily-
I'll mail the questionnaire to you. आप भेज देना,
Okay.
है ना? Only I'll mail them. They must send it to my email, the answers, so I can do that.
Okay.
Definitely, not a problem.
Okay. Okay. You do that, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Mr. Baba, the last question is, Mr. Baba is asking, what is the role of gadgetry in a part of good network? I mean, simulation, etc. I don't know what he means by this.
No, I understand what he means. For example, I'll
Yeah.
tell you, he talked of simulation. I actually do simulation
Okay.
as an exercise. Where what we would typically do is, let's say if we talk in, I do it for marketing people and for sales people.
Right.
Simulation basically is, it's a whole day, everybody sits with computer programs. They are given, it's actually gamification of sorts. It is based on a game called Diplomacy, where everybody represents a brand. They are told the resources that they have of the brand and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And then they begin, they've got points, they've got costs associated with using certain brand techniques and all that. And it needs a lot of hard work, but it's done. And then they play it in the first round. Okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to advertise here in this channel. I'm going to distribute in this channel, so on and so forth. And then on the basis of each person's answers, the market shares are worked out. Then they are told, okay, now this is where your market share stand. Now we go for round 2. So in a day, we play up to round 4 or 5.
Yeah, I've attended one.
So a lot of people. So simulation is fantastic. Gadgetry is important in virtual and online training for the simple reason that the worst thing is to say, you know, hey, you're still mute, unmute yourself. Or most people, in fact, today when they begin their training, they say, am I audible? It's the most popular phrase that you can hear nowadays.
Yeah.
So yes, gadgetry is important. Quality of internet connection is very important. And I think it's very, very critical.
Mm-hmm.
I hope Gurmukh ji, have been able to answer your question.
Okay. So this is an interesting question. Kishore Kant Majumdar is
Yes.
asking, you seem to have achieved a lot. Just a moment. A lot in your career life. What's in your opinion of complementary coaching to struggling business leader? What's your opinion of complementary coaching to struggling business leader?
What does he mean by the term complementary coaching? I just need to understand that.
Mr. Kishore Kumar Majumdar, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah. What do you mean by complementary coaching? Complimentary, does it mean free of cost?
Free of cost. I think.
Aisa bolo na. I'm sorry, but frankly, one of the concerns I have with doing things free is that the value drops immensely. So if there is a client and there are a whole lot of things I'm doing from him, I'll do half a dozen things free for him. That's not my problem at all. But I perhaps don't have so much of milk of human kindness flowing in my veins to be able to do everything free of cost. The second thing is we have a saying, in Hindi you say कि जिस चीज को मुफ्त मिलता है ना, उसकी कदर नहीं होती, है ना? There is Ghalib is supposed to have said at one time कि हमने माना कि कुछ नहीं Ghalib, मुफ्त आता है तो बुरा क्या है? So that kind of thing shouldn't happen. So no, I would not do anything free. Unless, of course, it's a client and I've had a long relationship and he's asked me for it. Like I told you, I've done I've counseled the children. I've, family counseling, marriage counseling, all that happens. That is not charged for. But per se, if a person is struggling, I believe that if he's ready to pay me, he will implement what I suggest much more than if he gets free advice. This is my view. Kishore, I hope I've been able to answer your question.
Okay, so there's one question from a student.
Yes.
And he's asking direct selling in network marketing business with low price product scope. Is it good for PGDM students? Like students who are doing management, MBA
No,
students?
I mean, in the sense, what
Direct
you want,
selling.
have a career in that area? Is that
Yeah,
what's
as
the
a
question? Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, to me, direct marketing per se has got a huge thing. There is a thing called MLM that we have called multi-level marketing, which is a form of direct marketing.
Right.
But then you have a lot of other areas in direct marketing that a person can get into. I don't normally advise direct marketing as a startup for somebody to start a company, for the simple reason that it's extremely labor intensive thing. And labor, apart from bringing costs into the picture, also brings in all kinds of other issues. So if you want to build a career, yes, there are great companies. There is an Amway, which is a very good company. There is Oriflame, which is very good. There are other companies that are there. If you're in a very small area, then you can go to places like Rajasthan. There are 2 or 3 very nice Bhilwara, etc. There are very small such companies. Then only I would say it's worth it, but not start up on your own unless you're already inheriting something. No, I wouldn't advise that.
Right. Okay. I think this is what we have time for, and we'll need to close now. And 1 or 2 small questions.
Yeah, go
there,
ahead.
but
Go ahead.
I don't think so. They are follow-up questions only. Yeah. So thank you very much, Mr. Rena. I think it was a very, very wonderful and engaging presentation, and lot of interaction. So now I would request Sucharita ma'am to give a formal vote of thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Pritima. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of all the members of ISTD Delhi chapter, I would like to extend my deepest gratitude to Mr. Karthik Raina for his deeply insightful talk on client versus customer, the trainer's dilemma. Sir, you began with the bringing great clarity to the operational and practical definition of client and customer, where you said that the former engagement is of a transactional and short-term nature, and the latter engagement is of a fiduciary and long-term nature. You also explained the relationship value curve beautifully, where you talked about how a person transitions from being a suspect to being a valued client. You also explained that transition is really insightful way through 3 different levels of connecting, convincing, and collaborating. Finally, you ended with a wonderful ghazal where you talked about empathy and about the importance of trainers cultivating an atmosphere of trust and understanding to facilitate an organic transition from client to customer. Thank you for such a richly insightful discussion, sir.
Thank you.
And I would like to thank Mrs. Pritima Kaushal, our program coordinator, for organizing this event. And we are very grateful to our chairman, Mr. Mukesh Kumar Jain, and honorary secretary, Mr. Ajay Kumar Sahu, for providing their support and encouragement. Thank you, all of you, for your great participation. And thanks to Delhi chapter for conducting this session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sucharita.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Sucharita ji, you would like to make the announcement for the
Yes,
future
yes.
program?
I'm very delighted to share with all of you that as a part of the Young Leaders series, ISTD Delhi chapter is organizing a virtual panel discussion on the Saturday, the 26th of December, 2020. The theme of the panel discussion is Future of Work, Role of Learning and Development. The eminent panelists participating in the discussion are Nikita Raut, AGM Bank of Baroda, and second one is Anil Santapuri, Director of L&D CGI, and third one is Shruti Mishra, late Talent Acquisition, Puma. The discussion will be moderated by our member, Mr. Yashwant Chauhan, Senior Manager, Corporate HR Policy and ER Group, GAIL India Limited. On behalf of the ISTD Delhi chapter, I would like to invite all of you on what promises to be a richly insightful panel discussion. Thank you.
आलोक जी वो क्रिएटिव दिखा दीजिए.
Sure, sir.
Pratima, if I can have a recording of this sent
Yeah,
whenever you can.
absolutely. Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Okay, thank you all very much. It was a real pleasure. Bye bye. All the best.
Just a second, sir.
हाँ बोलिए.
आलोक जी दिखाइए ठीक करके.
Thank you very much. And
आलोक इसको
I would also like to thank Mr. Vijay Paul, who
Thank you आलोक जी.
thank you everybody.
right.
Thank you. It was a great show. Great.
It was a great learning, sir, and we are very much delighted, sir,
Dr.
with
Rao,
your
you would like to say
lots of
something?
wisdom. It was a wonderful session, although people were
course.
less, but we'll keep another program of yours where we'll invite a lot of more people for their benefit.
So
Absolutely.
most welcome. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. It was a value add to all of us.
Thank you.